This is John Rossman, author of the Amazon Way books and former Amazon executive. On this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, we'll talk about some of the secrets that every leader can take from Amazon in creating digital businesses. Stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series, where today we're going to take an insider look at what we as leaders need to and must learn from the world's biggest, most successful retailer. You guessed it, Amazon. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in, we're about to go full Monty. If you're a regular, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. And we're honored to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. Thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. And remember, we always need your help in staying relevant, so get yourself over to iTunes, do it now, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. We really appreciate it when you do that. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. As a leader, whether you're a CEO, C-suite leader, sales leader, entrepreneur, leader in any capacity, we all know that business has dramatically changed in the last 10 to 15 years. And a major catalyst to the way we do business has been Amazon. Whether you directly compete with them in some way, shape, or form, or whatever it is, you know that they've changed retail, not only retail, but they've changed the way we watch TV. They are having a massive impact, and that impact is not likely to slow down. But what's the secret to the most disruptive company on the planet? And what can we as leaders learn from their model? Well, our guest today is John Rossman. He is an advisor to leaders on digital strategy, including the Internet of Things, which we're going to get into. He's a sought-after speaker on creating a culture of optimal excellence and innovation. He's the author of The Amazon Way, 14 Leadership Principles of the World's Most Disruptive Company, The Amazon Way on Internet of Things, 10 Principles for Every Leader from the World's Leading Internet of Things Strategies. And he should know because John was an executive at Amazon.com, where he launched the marketplace business. You remember, you may know what that is. He ran the enterprise services business, which today is over 50% of all Amazon units and supports over 3 million sellers. He's a leading analyst on Amazon and has been featured by the New York Times and CNBC. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome John Rossman.
Thank you for having me. I only wish my kids were as enthusiastic about welcing me as you are. So thank you very much. Wouldn't that be great?
Came home from work every night and the kids went, Dad's home!
They're teenagers, so it'd be completely unrealistic. So
and
yeah,
teenagers, Dad's home. Yeah, whatever.
Right, whatever.
So let's dive in. Who is John Rossman? What makes you tick, mate?
Well, I'm a dad. You already know that, but I work with clients on creating cultures that deliver both innovation and results. And I've always been interested in how processes work and how data works and how technology is used in organizations. But as I've gotten more and more into kind of helping leaders transition into digital models, I've seen it both as kind of this enterprise transformation that needs to happen, but also a personal transformation, right? Leaders need to do some different things to compete differently in this digital era. And so that's who I am, and I get the opportunity to both advise and go out and talk with a lot of audiences and great teams, all of which are trying to figure out like what's it mean for us to become digital.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's gone a long way from being a theory, and I still think that there are many leaders, I know, in my own experience as a consultant, there are many leaders who, despite all the evidence, are still in denial.
Yeah, and you might be in a business where from a customer standpoint, digital, too many people equate it to, we do things from the web or whatever. But competing digital is so much bigger and deeper than that, right? Like reinventing the way that work gets done, how you put more data and math and algorithms into the business. How you drive for efficiency, shorten cycle times, decrease errors, like all of those things are digital capabilities. It's not just about, having a mobile app. And too many leaders equate being digital to, having a mobile app, and my customers don't want to use a mobile app. They want to talk directly with me. Great. But there's still an opportunity for digital capabilities in your business. And the reality is, which I think is what you're pointing to, if you don't figure it out, somebody else already is.
Absolutely. It's interesting. One of my clients has a trucking company, and I was talking to them about being digital, and they're like, we couldn't be further from it. These are guys in trucks, loading trucks, unloading trucks, transporting stuff. And I go, well, how do you measure the mileage? How do you measure how much time on the road? That's all data. And he says, yeah, well, data's digital information that you coalesce to find out how to be more effective, to be more efficient, and how to price. Because there was a time when you priced based on, you looked at them and you went, okay, this is our price. Now you can look at data.
Right. Just last week, two quick stories just on transportation, right? Just last week, I was in Chicago, got to present to a user group for Project 44, which is a data hub business for transportation. And they are completely reinventing the way that data gets used across the supply chain to optimize the delivery routes, to optimize hitting the fill rates and delivery speeds. That's one. And then the other is worker safety, right? Worker safety is a big issue in transportation in many, many fields. The opportunity to use sensors and use data to help predict, avoid, and better manage worker safety is a big opportunity for digital, right? And it's a great area to get started in because everybody can easily get focused on improving worker safety, right? But I think it really gets to, the way that I look at strategy, which is not so much to say, well, how would I use this technology, but more importantly, what question or what problem do I want to solve, and how can I use data, technology, sensors to better inform that decision or to get better, richer, real-time data on it. And when you work backwards from that, you can find opportunities both big and small. And Amazon calls it working from the customer backwards. And I think that's a great, general metaphor of don't focus on how to use technology. Focus on what problem do I want to solve for, or what problem of my customers do I want to solve for, and you'll find lots of ways to innovate.
Yeah, and that's it. Now there are ways that were never there before. In this book, which I've got both of your books right here. Thank you very much for those, and I highly recommend you as the listener and the viewer get your hands on them. But this one, the first one here, the Amazon Way, 14 Leadership Principles Behind the World's Most Disruptive Company. I want to take a look at as many of the 14 as we can, but there was two that stood out to me right off the bat that I want to address because they could appear, underlined, they could appear to be even contradictory. And the first one, which is obsess over customers, right? Great. Absolutely. In the retail business, you got to obsess over customers, which kind of says the customer's always right. Then we go to number 4, which is leaders are right a lot. And so, and what we know is, I know because I'm a consultant like you are as well, that leaders are often wrong, that they misread, they have their own cognitive bias, they're seeing through their own lenses. Help us bring a balance to those and understand both of those, if you would.
Yeah, and so I think a couple of important points that you highlight there. First is these are aspirationals, right? And so by saying, what it's saying is good leaders are right a lot. Good leaders obsess over the customer. And so it's fully possible that a leader is not always right, and that's a failure in that. And that what that leadership principle is really highlighting is that a leader at Amazon has their area of expertise, and they're able to not just facilitate between individuals and others, but they actually have a point of view on the topics that they should have a point of view on, and they need to be right about those things, right? So you need to have expertise. But another one of the leadership principles is, sorry, I got to refer to this a little bit, is learn and be curious, right? Which is the one directly after that, right? And that encourages leaders to get external input and external expertise, in particular on topics that you may not be the expert on, in order to continue to learn. And it also recognizes that so many of today's advancements happen by cross-fertilization of expertise, right? And not just solo expertise. And so these leadership principles, as you're pointing out, are oftentimes in conflict. And I think that's the strength of them, not the weakness of them. Because depending upon the situation, you need to accentuate and in a wise way understand which leadership principles should I exercise here, or how do these work together to get to an even better answer? How do I not compromise on one but achieve another that might lead me to a new solution or to a new answer? And so, these leadership principles are not for everybody. In no way am I advocating that these are the right leadership principles for anybody other than Amazon. But the fact that they've made them clear, they've made them actionable, they've made them at a level that they can be used in everyday decisions, everyday meetings across the entire organization, helps to avoid bureaucracy at Amazon, right? And that is, I think, a core strength for organizations, is how do we push decision-making out towards the edge, closer to the customer, closer to line management, so that they can make the best decisions possible. But if we can make our decisions with a set of core values and orientation and strategy, then guess what? We're going to make decisions in a more consistent way going forward.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, the one you just pointed out, which was about learning to be curious, it's in my list of the things that I teach, is very high to the top is deep curiosity. Be willing to be curious constantly, particularly about the things you think you already know.
That's right.
Because
And that's the humility aspect that comes through there also, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, the biggest risk to organizations, especially successful organizations, is hubris, and avoiding that. And, in my business, I work with both clients in crisis and clients that are trying to make a transition. And the easiest ones to work with are the ones that are in crisis, because they're actually willing to change, right? They're willing to change the point of view, versus the clients that are successful. While they may say, I want to innovate, I want to change, at their hearts, they hesitate, and they haven't completely bought in for that need for change. And that is truly the hubris that holds them back.
And you brought up something there, because I know this was part of what you were doing at Amazon, but you bring up innovation. And there's no doubt that Amazon, like Netflix, like Airbnb, like Tesla, have been incredibly innovative. But this was part of your job there. Help us as leaders grasp how to create an environment because I've written a lot about this, and I often bang up against other leaders around it because of their understanding of it. From my point of view, I think that most people think a tweak is an innovation. A tweak is a tweak. It's not an innovation. Blockbuster disappearing made Netflix an innovation. So talk to us about catalyzing innovation in a culture. And how was that done at Amazon, and how were you leading the charge with that?
Well, this might be our first point where maybe we don't completely align on some of our perspectives, and everything, right? Which is great. In my experience, in the way I think about it, there's kind of big I innovation, which which is oftentimes the business model innovation, right? That you're referring to, right? Transitioning from, delivering a DVD to on-demand content. That's a business model change.
Yeah.
But there's also kind of small I innovation, which is really about the everyday refinements and new ideas that can take kind of an existing business model and existing structure and either improve the customer experience or accomplish a worthy business result, right? A small example of an innovation, like think about Amazon's dash button, right? Mm-hmm. And so the dash button is a branded button. It allows a customer to push the button and order the product at the moment of need, right? In the kitchen, in the pantry, in the garage. It's a great brand representation. I don't think anybody would position that as this big I innovation that has transitioned a business model, but yet it improves a customer experience. It gives great brand representation to retailers who want it, and it is leading to further and further innovation. So the next generation of dash buttons are actually embedded into the product. So the Brita water filter will actually reorder itself based on actual consumption and actual cleanliness, right? And so these little changes, if you continue pushing the edges on them, when you look back over the long journey, guess what? You actually have innovated over a longer period of time. Now, it may not be a business model change, but you are serving your customer in a new way, and you are driving for operational improvements along the way.
That's a very valid point.
And so that's why I kind of stress there's both operational excellence, which is doing the right thing all the time and being highly predictable, highly efficient, low errors, low quality problems. And then there's big I innovation, which is transitioning to new business models. Both of those are needed and vital. But and this is where I start with my clients. It's oftentimes it's like, let's find the little base hits that improve a customer experience or find an operational efficiency using technology, using data in a creative way that you haven't done yet. Build on those successes. And over time, if you create a culture that continues to do that and do that and do that, A, you'll find things along the way, and B, you'll create this culture that knows how to try things and fail and move forward on them, right? So that would be a little bit of the difference that I would position relative to innovation, and that's why there's opportunity in the innovation game for everybody, right?
Yeah,
everybody can find an operational.
What's interesting about it is that, I think that when we think of innovation, we think of going from, the vinyl record to the iPod, or and all the steps in between. But for me, one of the greatest innovations, particularly in anything that represents retail, is the innovation of serving the customer easier, not better, easier. And I think that's something that Apple did amazingly, that Amazon did amazingly, right? That Netflix has done amazingly. It's just making it easier. It's fascinating for me. Some might see it as a little dig. It's interesting because for the customer, because I am an Amazon customer and I am an Apple customer, but I'm also an Amazon provider and an Apple provider. And at the other side, they suck. Both of them. They're really hard to deal with. They're very difficult. You can never find your way around. The navigation is terrible, and the customer service is often very awkward. But as a customer, it's spectacular. As a customer, the innovation of understanding that business is built on taking care of the customers. And for me, the next big leap is the innovation on the other side of taking care of the suppliers. And I actually recently interviewed somebody who is running a massive company now that trains people in selling on Amazon. And he said the same thing. He says, but they are getting better because of people like him who are putting people in that process. So they're getting bombarded.
So I launched the third-party business in 2002, ran it in 2003. We completely believe that creating a great seller experience was critical in creating that positive momentum in the business and to get the business going. I think at some point, the business got so successful and scaled up that because I've heard the same critical feedback, and
Sure.
everything. And so I do think that companies like Amazon have a way of taking that customer passion and obsession and driving it to other key stakeholders. And I would agree with you also. Like, if they don't do that over the long term, the ecosystem will fall apart, right?
Yeah.
And it truly is an ecosystem business, meaning that all parties need to win in order for the system to survive. And if it's not fair, if it's not balanced, if it's not respectful, then over time the ecosystem always fails.
What do you think is, from a leadership position, what do you think is most different about Amazon versus other companies?
Well, I'm going to pick off two or three because it's honestly
of course.
difficult. I think one is they're willing to they think of the long term, and one of the leadership principles is about taking ownership, and it specifies about a good leader never compromises long-term value for short-term results. And Amazon is willing to invest over the long term for important initiatives. And Bezos is on record of just saying, just the fact that I will evaluate some investments over a 7 to 8 year period versus an 18-month period completely changes the portfolio of opportunities that I'll evaluate, right? And so I think that long-term notion and that long-term investment and build the business mentality and focusing on growth over profitability, I think is a key differentiator. I think the fact that Amazon views themselves first and foremost as inventors and as a technology company. And there's this quote about every company needs to find its inner technology company. Right. And I truly think that that's an important aspect of digital is no matter what business you're in, technology is not your IT organization, right? Technology is about serving your customer and driving operations. Your IT department plays a role in that, but it's going to be pretty tough to be your IT. And all leaders need to upscale their understanding, their ability to understand how do I properly deploy, articulate, define the technology that's needed in your business. And I think Amazon across the board, the business leaders in that have a higher technology understanding than any other business I've ever seen, even though they aren't inherently a technology company.
But it's interesting because when you say that, because they see themselves, I think the world looks at them as a retail company, but they don't look at themselves that way at all. And
they never define themselves as a retailer.
That's a big wake-up call for a lot of companies. So, I give you an example. I was, one of my mentors was talking to me, and he said, "What company do you have?" And I said, "Well, I have a consulting company aside from other things." And he said, "No, you don't." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Think digitally. What do you have?" We had this big conversation about the fact that my consulting is a byproduct of the fact that I have a media company, a digital media company, that I produce digital media like a machine constantly. And he went, "That's what," and I'm like, ah. And he goes, "That's why you have to understand that you have to be digital." He goes, "You're already doing it, you just didn't name it." But most people don't even understand that. They go, "Well, I'm just giving great consulting. Who cares?"
Yep.
So I really like what you're saying now about bringing people back to. I think there's an instinct to say, put a shingle up and say, we're a retailing company, we're Amazon, we're the biggest retailer in the world. But no, we're a technology company that does retail.
That's right.
Fascinating.
And the third attribute that I think distinguishes Amazon is from the very start. Read Jeff's 1997 shareholder letter, right? And what is he talking about? We aspire to be the world's most customer-centric company ever, right? Today, they're the most respected brand in the world. I think that they realize, A, that they fail at that objective every single day, but B, they continue to stay. And so that relentless obsession about doing what's right for the customer, but using that not as a scapegoat to just give customers things, but to drive excellence in the business. That's the translation of customer obsession. Is we need to always deliver things on time. We need to be in stock. We need our website technology to always work. We need to avoid customer contacts. We don't need to handle customer contacts well. We want to avoid them to begin with. That's how customer obsession translates into Amazon, which is be trustworthy and just make things so they work so your customer doesn't have problems. And I think there's a few more, but I think those stand out as the defining characteristics of Amazon.
So let's go to another side of this, because you were involved in the organization. And how long were you there?
I was there for about 4 years.
4 years, right? So that's a career nowadays. 4 years. So I'm sure you're aware. Back in 2015, there was a scathing New York Times article about Amazon and the work environment and what it was like.
I'm quoted. I was interviewed for that, and I'm quoted in that. Yes.
Right. So
David Straitfeld, New York Times. Yep.
Right. So it was pretty scathing. I remember because I was doing a presentation in Chicago on culture, and I brought it up, and I was saying, and Jeff Bezos sent out a memo which said, if you feel that you've been treated in this way, please write to me. Well, I'm thinking, does that work? I'm thinking it doesn't work, because if I write to you and my boss finds out and I'm a menial worker, I might be gone. So it's a very interesting thing for me. Has Amazon gotten too big to care? Have the teams gotten too big to care? I mean, you were in the inside. You were quoted in that environment. I'm really interested to hear about that from a place of culture.
Yeah, there's a big difference between being a demanding place to work, especially in the corporate setting of Amazon.
Sure.
They hold people accountable for getting the right results, right? There's a big difference between that, and then later in the second half of the article was about some abuse that people testify happened, right? Mm-hmm. I never saw anything like that. Some abuse cases happen. Amazon's a massive company, right? 300,000 employees. No doubt, like maybe they're true or maybe they're not true, but I don't believe, and I have a lot of friends there. I keep in contact with a lot of people. I don't think systematically it is that way, but they do expect leaders to achieve hard results. And it's not for everybody. If you like to hide behind bureaucracy, if you don't want to achieve hard goals, Amazon isn't the place for you. And they make no apologies for that, right? And so there's a big difference between being a demanding place that works, that gives you both ownership, accountability, and the resources to get things done, but holds you accountable for those results, versus kind of some of the abuse that was outlined in that article, of which I've never seen and I don't think. But Amazon, I think, to their credit, they took that. I think that article started a review internally, and they've changed some important policies that, when they started, they were the right thing to do, but as they've grown, maybe they've changed. And so you've seen a lot of Amazon. They don't do performance reviews anymore, right? They've come forward with some very progressive programs about part-time work scenarios, things that we would never even dream of having when I was there. And so I think they continue to challenge their own past and not fall prey to their own beliefs and their own past defining what the future is.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm sure you also know this, that the average tenure is about 9 to 12 months. It's a very short tenure. Now, we can blame some of that on millennials liking to change jobs pretty often. We know that millennials change job every 1.2 to 2 years, but it's even 9 months is fast for a millennial. And I know, because I've met people who work there, that people want to work at Amazon because it's damn good for the resume, like it is working at Google or somewhere else. But that move through is so fast that it kind of, let's say it facilitates the belief in that article.
Well, I don't know what the data is. The thing you do need to be careful about, kind of those median and average times, is they're hiring so many people that it skews the average tenure to be pretty low at this point. I was talking to somebody who works there, and he's been there for just over a year, and he's more than above the 50 percentile in terms of seniority, right? And it's because of both turnover as well as, they're hiring over 100,000 employees this year, right? And so you just have to be, I don't know the data, I just know you have to be careful about the data, and everything, right? But it is a great place to work if you want to accomplish real work and make a difference in customers' lives, right? And I'm thinking, again, mostly corporate. I'm not thinking about the fulfillment centers and things like that, right? Which is where a lot of the employees are. And a lot of the turnover also in fulfillment centers, like that tends to be a very high turnover environment across the entire industry.
How did, because obviously you didn't leave school and go to Amazon. So you had done a lot of other stuff beforehand. You'd been.
I've been a partner at Arthur Andersen. I was a partner in a consulting firm, and
so you've been. You played in the big boys game before,
right?
How did being at Amazon refine you as a leader, or did it?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. So I have one of my business partners I've worked with since 1995, and so we worked together before Amazon, and we worked together for the past 13 years after I left Amazon. And he said, John, the thing that you are so much different at coming out of Amazon is that you're always working to simplify and clarify. Like any statement, any proposal, any idea, what you're always trying to do is simplify that and make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. And I think that's one of the tricks of Amazon is when it comes to proposals or ideas, they don't do PowerPoint. Every idea gets written out as it's called a narrative, so a 2 or a 6 page narrative. And it really forces people to articulate clearly what their idea is and ability to rationalize it and defend it. But it also forces the people who need that information to actually read it, to grok it, and to be a higher bar, a higher level consumer of information. And while it slows some things down at Amazon, right, they take a lot of time in deciding what is it we're going to do and what is it that we're not going to do, which is the very essence of what good strategy is, right? And so I think the thing I learned a lot at Amazon, but the thing I learned most was how to be clear in my ideas and how to simplify those ideas and to facilitate that amongst others.
Do you think, because I see a connection, I just want to know where you're at with it. Do you think there's a very sincere connection between innovation and that simplification and clarity?
Oh, big time. Absolutely. So the third leadership principle is invent and simplify, right? And you could have guessed that maybe the leadership principle would just be invent, but they recognize that simplification is as important and is as hard as inventing. And the reason why, especially internally, is simple processes, simple procedures, simple approaches, they scale, right? Yeah. And so you're able to scale it to a worldwide way. And so that simplification is a core leadership perspective at Amazon and is highly regarded. And it's hard. That's what in most companies, like when you think about like, hey, we're going to build the business requirements to do something or outline our project approach or our program approach. What happens is, everybody wants to be collaborative, which is great. They want to be respectful, which is great. But what happens because of that sometimes is we don't get at the right idea and we don't clarify it amongst ourselves. So that idea is kind of bloated. It's easy to misinterpret. It's not right. It's not as good as it should be. And so you just need to kind of tip the scale a little bit to like, let's be a little more demanding in the articulation of those ideas. And you can do that without losing the collaboration, and you can do that without losing the respect, but you can demand that ideas be better articulated.
But there's also another piece in that, and I think that, because I see it in working with my clients too, particularly a client who is older and a leader, simplification is almost anti. What I mean by that is, if it's complicated, I look big. I look better because I'm the only one who could think of all these 72 pieces that go into this. And it's that old school mentality of, look how great I am. I'm the leader because I can think through the 72 parts. And then they get pissed off if some millennial comes along and goes, we can do that in 5 pieces.
And in my experience, that same person, what they're great at is saying no to a new idea, right? Yep. But what they aren't constructive at is like, how do I get to yes? one of the sayings at Amazon was there is no, right? The job of a leader is to figure out how to get to yes when we're problem solving or coming up with a new idea. It's easy to find reasons why something can't happen or something can't work, but it takes a real creative leader and an innovative leader to figure out in a difficult situation, how do we come up with a solution that works? How do we get to yes? And so having that there is no mentality was a great lesson at Amazon. You have to apply it in the right circumstances, as you do have with all of these perspectives.
Let's jump onto a new subject here, because I think this is something that we're a little bit on the cutting edge of, and I would love for you to hear you about it, because you're going to understand it better than most people, because you were a part of it, which is the Internet of Things. I mean, we hear that language. I don't think most people actually understand what it is. So let's just start with the simplicity of that. What does it mean when you say the Internet of Things, which of course you have this great book on?
Yeah. So the Internet of Things is the approach of putting sensors onto everyday devices so that we can recognize events and get data that otherwise we couldn't. In one sense, a pure digital business has always had this natural advantage, which is lots of data about what's going on, right? Because of using a browser or using a phone. And what the Internet of Things does is it helps level the playing field between physical or analog businesses versus digital businesses. Right. Because I'm able to put sensors onto everyday items, right? Whether it's my book or my water bottle or my car or my phone, it's the ability to collect more data, and so that I can serve that customer better or recognize the circumstance better. It really is brought about, like there's this confluence of capability that is, because putting sensors onto objects is something that's happened for a long, long time, especially if you go into industrial fields. But it's the suitability of sensors for all types of environments. It's cloud computing, which has lowered the bar and made it so much easier for companies to have data capability. And it's the ubiquity of bandwidth, right? The ability to have wireless scenarios. Those three things coming together have made for this exciting time where now we can ask the question, what event or what piece of data would I like to know about to help solve a problem that I don't know today? And you can typically figure out a way to put a sensor in there to get that piece of data to have that insight, right? And so it's a way of getting data and getting events so you can better serve a customer, drive for operational improvement, or think about a new business model.
How do you, because I want people to sort of grasp it, this is as a sensor on your fridge to let you know you've run out of milk, that can order your milk for you. That's as an example of it. It's letting you know you're low on this or you're high on that or whatever it might be. It sensors on your clothing for heat and for overheating and whether you need to hydrate and all these wonderful things. But there's the other side, and the other side is the paranoia that people have. I believe a certain woman who's an advisor to a certain president talked about the camera in the TV watching us. There is that paranoia, and I think it's certainly older, but it's still there, which is that they're watching us. There is a big brother sense to this. How do you address that? Do you address it?
Well, I don't have deep expertise or deep point of view relative to the privacy perspective, but I would bring forth two perspectives. One is that if you think you have privacy today, you likely don't, right? So think about the Equifax breach that just happened, right? And so here, this company is that nobody actually signed up for. Nobody said, yes, I want my data collected by Equifax, right? But they know my social security number, they know my purchase history, they know deep data about me, right? And so I would, and think about what Google already knows about you. Like I would already argue you don't have privacy, right? And on the second thing, I think that you have to go, how do I accomplish these capabilities, but also bring a balance, bring choice to privacy? and not use it as a crutch or as a fear-mongering mechanism to slow down progress. Staying competitive is critical for society, critical for our countries, and it's those countries that are able to bring about the balance between privacy and advancing technology that are going to win. And I don't think it's constructive for any conversation to take this what I think of as kind of absurd one-time stories and say, well, all of it's bad because this one thing can happen, right? Yeah. And so I think that's the challenge in these conversations. Like anything, they tend to go kind of very polar one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, I think I certainly have my concerns about this stuff, but as Gary Vaynerchuk said probably 6 or 7 years ago, privacy is a thing of the past. It's that simple. Just accept it and then monitor it. Be aware that it's already a thing of the past, and you can then be aware of how much you release. But he said something I thought was quite profound in there. He said, for instance, in the UK, the UK are the most photographed people in the world because of all the CTV. It's massive everywhere. But like he said, there are things about that really I dislike and I'm upset about. But like he said, if you know there's always a camera over your shoulder, maybe that makes us a better society. Maybe that makes us a little more conscious of how we speak to people because somebody's filming you. And we see shit that would have happened years ago and people would have talked about it, but nobody would have evidence. Now somebody's got a phone out and is filming that. So I think it's another level of that. And I think with anything, it's very easy to go, as you said, polarized, black or white. I don't know that any of it is all good, and it's certainly not all bad. But I think that we, as adults, you're talking about one of these Amazon leadership principles, which is absolute responsibility and being held to that. And I think that's a key feature.
The term we always used at Amazon was around trust, right? Like we have to be trusted by the customer, and depending upon the scenario, that's either defined or articulated in many ways, but it's complex, no doubt about it. And it is going to be a defining issue, I think, for this next generation. But I would just say, like, if you think you have it today, I think that war was fought a long time ago, and we're not there, right? And I do think it is about control of data. I think is going to be the key customer attribute that has to be defined. And I think there's a need for standards relative to what sort of customer control is given around data. Personally, like I'm upset that I have no control around the data that credit bureaus collect about me, right? Exactly. Like, let's go after some of those things.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I mean, I'm old enough to remember people being very nervous about using a credit card online, when the internet first came about. And more stuff is purchased with Amazon than any other company. I think the Chinese company, what they're called now,
Alibaba
are getting up there too. And, enormous amounts with credit cards. And one of the things that I've said to people before is pay attention because it's actually safer to use your card with a good company like that than it is to go into a restaurant and hand your card to the server. So it's far easier to get nicked. So it's a very interesting thing. I think we are far further ahead than we think we are, and we're only at the beginning of where it's really going.
Well said.
I've got to ask you this because I know listeners, viewers are going to want to know this, and I know you've probably been asked it. Bezos. Mm-hmm. You got to know him? You got to meet him?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I didn't report directly to him, but we had lots of meetings together, and we took a couple trips together. So, right. Absolutely.
So I saw Bezos on Oprah when he first started. I don't know if you ever saw that interview. And he was this, very meek and skinny little guy with a little bit of a horseshoe hairdo. And, and he was kind of nerdy and awkward, talking about selling books from his basement and being on his knees and, and talking about getting tables so they could lean over rather than knee pads rather than tables. And now I see him, and he's, there's a presence about this guy. Like, he has a presence.
Yeah, he's been lifting some weights. You can tell that.
Oh
too.
yeah,
So,
I mean,
he's
I'm a bodybuilder.
he's preparing for space.
Yeah, this guy, he's been into some stuff here. I mean, he's got a build on him. He's got a shaved head. He's got the glasses. He looks like he's Secret Service. It's funny. But what do you think is one of the major misconceptions about him?
Major misconception.
I don't know what coming into Amazon. I mean, because you were a leader there, so coming in.
Well, I think it kind of comes to the if there is a misconception, I think that the article that you talked about, which is, that Amazon's culture, and everything, right? And I think that would be the biggest misconception. Like he is a demanding leader. He is right a lot. He lives these leadership principles. He's extremely consistent in what he prioritizes and how he thinks through things, which helps scale the entire organization. But he really is just about getting to the right results, and everything, right? He loves having fun. He's got a famous laugh, and but he's very consistent, and so I think this whole notion around Amazon's culture is a little bit twisted. It is a demanding place to work, but don't equate demanding for bad or inappropriate. It just means you have to get the right results.
Well, that's why I asked you the question about how has it refined you. That's why I asked that question, because I think that I've often said, in order for the diamond to become a diamond, it has to be pushed against the wheel. You have to grind it down. And a lot of people will back away from that, and other people go, no, I want to shine.
That's
right.
And
I think, I've never worked in Amazon, so I don't know. But, is it the grind of abuse, or is it the grind of polish? And what you're saying is it was the grind of polish. And that's why I wanted to ask you specifically. Where do you think, looking at your experience in Amazon, being part of this company, being part of this culture, being part of this leadership, where do you think that most leaders are failing today in the context of what you understand?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a lot of area we can cover there. But I think, first and foremost, we've already talked about it, which is believing that yesterday's success and the thinking that got you to that success is going to be the right principles or the right strategy or the right thinking in the future, right? Mm-hmm. And Bezos has this quote, which is the death knell for any company is to allow the past to define the future, right? And I think that is something that, especially with successful companies, I mentioned, like I like to work with companies in crisis because they're eager for change, Absolutely. Right? But successful leaders and successful companies, they don't. And I think the other thing that leaders don't really understand, everybody wants innovation and they want to be innovative, but they don't understand that innovation is typically a set of failed experiments time and time and time again, right? And Winston Churchill has this quote about, my success is just a string of failures all linked together, right? Or something to that effect. And that is the innovative process, which is test and fail, test and fail, test and fail. I'll go back to the Amazon Dash button, right? The first version of that was called the Amazon Dash Wand. It never went out of beta. Really wasn't a success, but instead of stopping, Amazon progressed to the Amazon Dash button. Amazon launched a huge failure, the Amazon Fire Phone. But what followed closely after that, using a lot of those capabilities, was the Amazon Echo, right? This mega unpredicted success in the voice recognition category. And so I think that most leaders want innovation, but they don't understand that failure is such a key part of that innovative process. And they don't know how to govern it. I mean, they don't know how to manage it well. And they punish people. Failure is unaccepted, right? Well, the failure of execution is unaccepted. But actually failing, testing an idea, that is the scientific process upon which innovation is based on.
Of course. Yeah, it's an interesting thing around the voice. Gary Vaynerchuk was saying in an interview this week I saw, he said that the future is voice. And what he said about that was, we look at Google and we go, nobody can compete with them. And he goes, but you're going to see voice searching will compete. And he goes, and he said, Amazon is right up there. So Google have Alexa, and you've got these things, but it's like instead of typing in, what is the average tenure at Amazon, you simply ask, what was the average tenure at Amazon? And that voice recognition, that is very, very powerful. And Amazon, again, it's one of those things where, it's a retail company. No, it's a tech company. They're so far ahead of that curve that I know they're getting into the car thing and they're starting looking at all these different things.
Well, I mean, and their most profitable business is actually their cloud business, right? It's called AWS, Amazon Web Services, right? Yeah. They are the market leader. They're 3 times the size of Microsoft in cloud computing, and they got there because we knew we needed scalable technology for the retail business. But what we said was, we need to have external clients for this core capability because only external clients were going to be demanding and were going to be critical. And so they could test it, right, and give you feedback.
Yeah.
And so they've done that with a number of capabilities, right? I published these books on CreateSpace, which is Amazon's self-service publishing platform, right? It's a great service, and they've done so many things like that where they create tools that maybe they need internally, but they say, how do we turn them inside out, have external customers? Because I can maybe discover a new business, but more importantly, I'm going to get critical feedback when I have external customers.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And at Amazon, they call that platform strategy, right? Like that's a platform strategy.
Yeah. Each of us as leaders is tested. Things happen. What was a turning point in your life that changed your leadership or your business philosophy?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, like the time at Amazon was key, but I think since then I've gotten to work with a lot of companies, a lot of leaders about digital transformation and making change happen. And I'm an engineer by background, and so I always approached it as like this math problem, right? As this like, hey, we can decrease cycle times, we can improve data, we can integrate things together. But what I've come to see is it's a complement of both that scientific, like how do we make the process better, but it's also about individual change, right? Mm-hmm. And so I've learned how to respect and recognize that type of individual change that needs to happen, and I try to figure out like who's the leader that I need to work with on a personal basis to help change some of their own beliefs and biases and approaches. Because if I can't get them to also personally change some of the things they prioritize and do, then this corporate or enterprise approach likely won't be as successful. And so that's been new for me over the past 4 or 5 years, and it's really helped me see things through a new lens.
Very cool. I think that my belief is that people who are highly successful, and by that I don't just mean financially, but just generally in wealth and in fulfillment, are obsessed. I know we have a lot of negative context about that in our world, but when I say obsessed, I mean a book comes out about it, you have to read it. You see a movie and there's something in the movie about it, that's the part of the movie you talk about. There's a conversation going on over there, you have to be part of it. What is John Rossman obsessed with?
Oh my God. What am I think if from a business context, I would say it's really helping leaders recognize, like, you have to figure out, how am I going to change from a successful business into the next generation of that business? And back to Bezos' quote, Charlie Rose asked him, Jeff, are you worried about Amazon being disrupted? And Bezos laughed and he said, it's not a question of if, it's a matter of when. And I'm just trying to make it so it's not in my lifetime. And I think if every leader kind of got that notion of like, if you're not disrupting yourself, somebody else is, and that allows you to go on the offense versus playing defense. Yeah. Like that is the thing I am obsessed with, is helping leadership recognize it doesn't matter what you did in the past. There are either small companies or competitors are going to figure out how to take a piece of your business and to serve your customers in innovative ways. And the only way to prevent it is to reinvent yourself, right? And that, it's Clay Christensen's The Innovator Dilemma is absolutely true.
Absolutely. What's the one thing that you hope that our listeners, our viewers will get out of this show, like that you want them to really take away and say, okay, I got to put this in action today?
Yeah, that becoming digital is not this theoretical thing that happens, that there's actual steps that you can take today to help drive for clarity and to bring better customer obsession into your business, and to think, how do I solve problems in a different way, typically using a different set of tools. And you can actually do that at most any level in the organization, right? And it's the little patterns and it's the little examples that each of us set that help set an organizational tone about doing this more and more as an organization. And so that would be, don't wait for the big enterprise to do it and everything. Like, get after it yourself.
However, there are going to be a lot of leaders who are going to think of it that way. Like, it's how you work with companies. How do you get them over that hump?
Well, I think there are some things that only the senior leaders and the board can approve on, right? And that's the big business model bets that have to happen. But the ideas can come from anywhere. And as I already pointed to, like, figuring out how to solve today's problem using some new techniques is the place for most companies to start, right? Like, why did we have that error? How did that customer experience happen if we're as good at this as we think we are? How can we continue to improve the customer experience? Those are questions that most any place in the organization can ask and can seek answers to. And so that's how I start with most of my clients, is like, let's solve a problem that is a today problem that doesn't require big, massive business model change or enterprise bets. And then we'll earn our way to asking those different questions.
Yeah. Great stuff, my man. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure having you here. I hope you'll stay with us to the very end. Please tell our listeners, our viewers, where they can find out more about you and what it is that you do in your company and your consulting, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. Show. I mean, two places. So you can find the books at Amazon. They're available in paperback, Kindle, audio, and just search the Amazon way, and you'll find both. And then you can just go to johnrossman.com, and that's my blog, and you'll find more about me and some of the things I write about. And so that's the two places you can go.
That's fabulous. Well, thank you for being on the show. It's been a pleasure having you here.
Well, you're a master at this, and I really appreciate all that you do and your podcast. I've become a big listener. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. And just stay with us to the end, and we want to thank you again. I want to thank you, dear listener, for tuning in. And as always, please don't just listen. Make sure you take the time to listen. I know we have podcasts in the background, but listen, take notes, grab a pen. I know it's old-fashioned. Grab a pen, grab a paper, write some notes. Think about what you can do. Challenge yourself to actually implement some of the amazing things that John has shared with you here. It's valuable stuff. And remember, the research consistently shows that one of the biggest challenges facing even the most successful companies can be somewhat counterintuitive, that the fastest growing companies often hit a point where they realize that they're spending a fortune attracting, training, and developing talent, and also having them leaving them at a just extremely high rate. If you're sick of investing in training and developing your talent only to have them leave you before you get your ROI, then come and speak to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside of your organization by tapping into your purpose. Fullmontyleadership.com, providing you with the concrete soft skills to get you and your organization to the top and keep you there. Why? Because you can't outsource authenticity. Remember to also get yourself over to matrix.fullmontyleadership.com. Matrix like the movie, you don't need the www. Matrix.fullmontyleadership.com and get your authentic leadership matrix self-assessment tool. Find out for yourself how good you are in the 5 categories of leadership. It's a $197 value. It's absolutely free to you. Get yourself over there, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com. Till next time, this is Dov Barron saying, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about how you, as a leader, in your organization need to get more digital, and it isn't what you think it is. Till next time, this is Dov Baron, and I am out.